copyright. Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. I pulled up to the office and immediately sensed that something was wrong. A police car was parked near the entrance, and inside, flashes of blue uniforms moved through the dimly lit space. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep going. As soon as I stepped inside, every gaze turned to me. I walked in slowly, controlling my irritation, until I saw them two cops stationed right outside my office door. And inside sat him. George. That bastard was rummaging through my documents like he owned the place. His broad back barely fit behind my desk, and his thick fingers lazily flipped through my paperwork. He didn't even bother looking up until I took another step forward. "What's going on here?" I asked coldly. George smirked, finally lifting his eyes from the papers. "Michael, good to see you," he drawled with a smug grin. "Word has it your business isn't exactly clean." I clenched my fists. It was his old game. Pressure. Intimidation. Ever since I had smashed his face in for making a move on my daughter, Catherine, he had been relentless, constantly trying to make my life miserable. "Word, huh?" I asked skeptically. "And where's the warrant?" George lazily leaned back in my chair. "A warrant? Oh, come on, let's not get too formal, Michael. We're friends, after all." "We're not friends, George." "Well, that's disappointing," he said with mock sorrow, standing up. "Because I was about to offer you a deal." I didn't answer. I just waited. "You see," he continued, taking a step closer to me, "your problems can go away if you decide to be reasonable. And what do you want?" "Not much. A little respect. A little cooperation." And he grinned wider. "I'll still get my time with your daughter." The world flashed red. I launched at him before he could even finish his sentence. My fist crashed into his jaw with a dull thud, whipping his head to the side. He staggered back, but I didn't give him time to recover. Another punch straight to the gut. He coughed, doubling over, but I saw his hand move toward his belt. I didn't give him the chance. I felt movement behind me, but it was too late. Hands grabbed my shoulders, yanking me backward. I tore free from one grip, spun around, and drove my elbow into the nearest cop's face. His nose crunched, and he collapsed, clutching at the bloody mess. But before I could move, two more jumped me. One tried to twist my arm behind my back, but I jerked free and drove my knee into his stomach, shoving him aside. The second landed a punch to my ribs, but I caught his wrist, yanked him forward, forcing him to bend over. I was about to strike his neck when I heard the distinct click of a gun being cocked. Enough. I froze. George stood there, aiming his pistol directly at my chest. Blood dripped from his split lip, but his eyes gleamed with cruel satisfaction. "Calm down, Michael. You just assaulted police officers. That's a serious crime, you know." I breathed heavily, forcing down the fury boiling inside me. "Serious?" I scoffed. "But you're not going to arrest me, are you?" George tilted his head, pretending to think. "No, we're not. You got me there." He smirked again. "But you're getting out of hand, Michael. I've been patient with you. But after this..." He wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand. "You need to be taught a lesson." I narrowed my eyes. "And how do you plan on doing that?" George's grin widened. "Oh, we have a special little place for guys like you. We call it the basement for the unruly. I think you're going to love it." I clenched my fists, but the gun in his hand made my next move clear. "Boys," George gestured to his men, "take him. Get him to the warehouse. Let him reflect on his actions." Two cops grabbed my arms, twisting them behind my back. I struggled, but another punch to the gut forced the air from my lungs. "Relax, Michael," George chuckled, patting my cheek as they dragged me away. "This is just a friendly conversation." His laughter echoed in my ears as they shoved me into the back of the police cruiser. They took me out of the city. The road got rougher, bumpier, until we turned onto a dirt path leading to an abandoned warehouse, its windows boarded up, its metal gates rusted. The car came to a stop. They dragged me out, shoved me forward. I stumbled but kept moving as they hauled me inside. The smell hit me first: mildew, rust, and something rotten. The concrete floor was cold, the walls stained with old, dark blotches. I knew what this place was, and I knew what was coming. "So, Michael," one of the cops sneered. "Still feeling tough?" They positioned me in the center of the room. The first punch landed in my stomach. I bent over but stayed on my feet. The second hit my face. My jaw rattled, but I didn't fall. "Tough bastard," one of them muttered. "He doesn't know the fun's just getting started," another chuckled. They grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. A flashlight beam seared into my eyes, and then rough, Filthy fabric covered my face. I knew what was coming. A sudden rush of water slammed against my face. It flooded my nose, my mouth. I tried to inhale, but my lungs locked up. My body thrashed instinctively. My brain screamed for air, but there was none, just the suffocating, drowning flow. But I didn't break. I knew how to endure. I knew how to resist. I had been through worse. These bastards were nothing new. When they finally pulled the rag away, I gasped for air. One of them leaned in, smirking. "How's that feel?" I spat in his face. The first kick to my ribs nearly knocked me out. Then another, and another. I lost track of time, lost count of the blows. But eventually, they got tired. I lay there, blood dripping from my lip, fighting to breathe. "All right, I think he's learned his lesson," one of them said, wiping his hands. They hoisted me up and dragged me back to the car. "Listen, Michael," one of them drawled as they shoved me in. "You get it now, right? This is just the beginning." I didn't respond. "Once the boss has his fun with your daughter," he leaned closer, "we'll take our turn too." I froze. "She's a pretty thing," another one added. "You wouldn't mind sharing, would you?" I breathed slowly, controlled. Only one thought remained in my mind. "I will kill them all." They laughed. "Here's a gift for you, Michael." The door swung open, and they shoved me out. The asphalt slammed into my face. My body rolled across the road. I felt something crack in my shoulder, but I managed to tuck in and brace for the fall. The car didn't even slow down. It just drove off, leaving me sprawled on the roadside. But I was already getting up. And soon, one of them would be lying here instead of me. I pushed myself to my feet, every muscle in my body screaming in protest. Pain pulsed in my chest, my ribs burned, my shoulder throbbed from the impact. But worse than the pain were their words, their vile, taunting voices still echoed in my head. Catherine. I had to get to her first. I had to make sure she was safe. With a deep breath, I forced my legs to move, walking down the empty road. There were no cars in sight, but I didn't care. Nothing mattered except getting home in time. A past that never fades. Catherine was everything to me. My blood. My light in this rotten world. When Olivia died, I thought I wouldn't be able to go on. She had been my first and only true love, gentle, kind, with a soft voice that could calm me even in my darkest moments. That day, I was supposed to pick her up from work, but a last-minute meeting kept me. Olivia decided to drive herself. What happened next was like a nightmare. A truck that failed to brake in time. Crushed metal. Screams. And then just a coffin and silence. Catherine was only 5 at the time. She sat on my mother's lap during the funeral, too young to understand why her mother had been shut inside that wooden box. I didn't know how to live after that. I just existed. Worked to keep from going insane, took care of Catherine. But inside, I was already dead. And then Julia appeared. I met her by chance at a cafe where I had gone just to sit in silence. She was a waitress, but not like the others. When she saw me that evening, disheveled, hollow-eyed, lost, she didn't look away. She didn't pretend I wasn't there. "You need coffee. And someone who will just listen," she had said. I brushed her off, but she didn't leave. Julia managed to melt the ice that had trapped me after Olivia's death. Slowly, step by step, she entered my life. She befriended Catherine, learned to listen when I spoke about Olivia, and never tried to replace her. I respected that about her. By the time we got married, Catherine was already calling her mom. Not her real Motherno, she never forgot Olivia. But Julia became something important to her. A pillar of support. And now, they were both in danger. The return as soon as I reached the house, a sense of unease settled in my gut. The lights were on inside, but there was no movement visible in the windows. I pulled out my keys, but the door. It wasn't locked. Bad. I stepped inside cautiously, keeping my steps light. "Julia?" I called out. No answer. I crossed the living room, heading toward the stairs. Then I heard a faint rustling sound from upstairs, followed by a muffled sob. "Catherine." I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time, my heart pounding in my chest. Her bedroom door was open. She sat on the floor near the window, curled up, her shoulders trembling. Broken glass glittered across the floor, and in the center of the wreckage lay a brick wrapped in paper. "Catherine." I crouched in front of her, carefully reaching for her hand. She flinched at first, but then recognized me. "Dad." Her voice was barely a whisper, laced with fear. They want." She pointed a trembling finger at the note. I picked it up, unfolded it, and felt my stomach knot with rage. "Party coming up soon, sweetheart. You'll have to work hard to keep the boys entertained." The fire of fury ignited inside me, a burning heat spreading through my veins. My fingers crushed the paper into a tight ball before I tossed it aside. "This is just talk, Kat," I said, looking her in the eyes. "They want you to be scared, but I won't let them get anywhere near you. Not now, not ever." She nodded, but tears still streamed down her cheeks. I clenched my jaw. I needed a safe place for her, and there was only one man I trusted. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. The rings felt endless before a hoarse, familiar voice finally answered. "Michael? Didn't think I'd be hearing from you again." I exhaled sharply. "Danny, I need help. Urgent." Silence on the other end. Then, a quiet sigh. "So, it's that bad? Worse than you think. Are you home? Where else would I be? It's not like I can run across rooftops anymore." I closed my eyes, suppressing the wave of emotions that surfaced. "I'm bringing Catherine to you. I need her to be safe." "Then stop wasting time talking. Get here." I hung up and turned to my daughter. "Pack only what's necessary, Kat. We're leaving." She didn't argue. The road to Danny's felt endless. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Catherine sat in silence, wrapped in her hoodie, her small fingers curled into the fabric. Every now and then, I glanced at her, making sure she was okay. Finally, I turned down the familiar alley. Danny's house stood on the outskirts of town, old but sturdy, surrounded by high gates and equipped with security cameras at every corner. Even though he could no longer walk, he still knew how to protect himself. I pulled up to the gate, killed the engine, and stepped out. Catherine followed, but as soon as she was out of the car, she gripped my hand so tightly it almost hurt. She was afraid I would disappear. I squeezed her hand in return. "You're safe now, Kat. I promise." The door opened, and there he was. Danny had changed. He looked older than I remembered. Deep wrinkles lined his face, and a shadow of stubble covered his cheeks. A blanket draped over his lap, concealing his useless legs. But his eyes remained the same. Sharp, watchful, ready for a fight. "Well, don't just stand there. Get inside," he grumbled, rolling his wheelchair back. "I don't usually take visitors this late, but for you, Michael, I'll make an exception." We stepped in, and I shut the door behind us. The house smelled of coffee and gun oil. I sat Catherine down on the couch before taking a seat across from Danny. "Talk," he said curtly, lacing his fingers together. George decided to play games again. I spoke evenly, keeping my emotions in check, but inside, I was seething. "They took me to a warehouse, tortured me, tried to break me. But, you know me." "I do," Danny nodded. "And I know that if you're here, the real problem isn't you." I glanced at Catherine. She sat with her head down, still trembling. "They threatened her." My voice dropped lower, almost a growl. "I can't let them get near her." Danny looked at Catherine, then back at me. "She stays here." I exhaled, finally letting some tension drain from my shoulders. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he folded his arms. "Tell me what you're going to do." I met his gaze. "I'm going to end this, once and for all." I sat across from Danny, feeling the tension spread through my body. My head pounded, my ribs ached from the beating, but none of it mattered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I needed to call Julia to make sure she was safe. I dialed her number and held the phone to my ear. 1 ring. 2. 3. No answer. My chest tightened. I tried again. Same result. Grinding my teeth, I rose from the chair, gripping the phone tighter in my hand. "What's wrong?" Danny asked, watching me carefully. I didn't answer. The unease inside me twisted into something colder. Julia always answered. Always. Even if she was busy, she'd decline the call and text me back. But now nothing. I called again. This time, there were no rings. No voicemail. Just a voice. A voice that made my blood turn to ice. "Michael, looking for your wife?" I froze, my grip tightening on the phone until the plastic casing creaked. "George," I hissed. "Glad you figured it out right away." His voice was smug, amused. "You're a smart guy, aren't you?" A surge of adrenaline rushed through me. "Where is she?" "Oh, don't worry. She's with us. For now. We figured she'd stay with us for a little while, at least until you can prove you're not going to do anything stupid." I shut my eyes and took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "If you so much as touch her." "Are you threatening me, Michael?" George laughed. "Not the best strategy, considering your current situation." I stayed silent, feeling the familiar darkness settle in my chest. "Let's be reasonable," he continued. "I don't want this to turn into a bloodbath. I just need you to settle down." Stay out of trouble. Keep quiet, and your wife will be just fine. You know I'm not going to do that. My voice was low, ice cold. Of course, I know, he chuckled. That's why we have incentives. I heard sounds in the background. Footsteps. Muted voices. And then, Michael. Julia's voice. Soft. Shaking. I clenched the phone like a lifeline. Julia, are you okay? Her voice cut off suddenly, followed by a sharp gasp, and then George's voice returned. See? She's fine. For now. But you know, women are so delicate. So fragile. Just a little pressure, and they start to break. My fist clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. What do you want? Here's the deal, Michael. His voice dropped the amusement, turning serious. You disappear. You stop whatever you're planning. Forget about us, and we'll forget about you. I let out a slow, humorless chuckle. Do you really think I'd agree to that? If you care about your wife, yes. I exhaled, forcing my breathing to stay even. Where is she? Oh, Michael, why do you need to know that? George laughed again. That's not information we're willing to share. Just stay put, stay quiet, and in a few days, she'll be back with you whole. He paused, then added with a venomous smirk in his voice. Well, mostly whole. Something inside me snapped. George, I said evenly, my voice calm, deadly. Enjoy this moment. It's your last. I stared at the dark screen of my phone, my hands trembling not with fear, but with fury, with the cold realization that this had turned into an open war. George would never let us go. He wasn't the kind of man to give warnings and then back down. He wouldn't stop until he had taken everything from me, until he had crushed me under his boot. But what he didn't know was that I don't break. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to focus. Enough. It was time to remember who I used to be. This city had long since rotted from the inside out. George was just one piece of a much bigger, filthier system where the law meant nothing and a badge was nothing more than a shield for criminals. These bastards hadn't been real cops for a long time. They acted like kings because no one dared to challenge them. But it was time to change that. My phone vibrated again. I glanced at the screen of bank notification. Your accounts have been frozen. Please contact your branch for further details. Another blow. Another warning. Then the phone rang. I answered immediately. Mike. Todd's voice was rushed, frantic. What the hell is going on? What happened? They stormed into the office. Some kind of court order for property transfer earning everything upside down. They kicked everyone out. Wouldn't even let people take their things. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Who's in charge? A couple of cops, but some fat guy in a suit is running the show. Says there's a new owner now. I already knew the answer, but I still asked. George? No, but it's obviously his people. Mike, damn it, what should I do? I closed my eyes. Inhale. Exhale. Get out of there, Todd. Forget the office. Mike. Go. Now. He hesitated, then let out a sharp breath. All right, but what are you going to do? I smiled slowly. I'm going to do what I do best. I stepped outside, breathing in the cold night air. My ribs ached, pain throbbed in my temples, and my fingers still trembled from exhaustion, but all of that faded into the background. There was only one thought in my head. How long will it take to wipe them out? I hadn't always been a businessman. I hadn't always lived a quiet life. I used to be a weapon. I was trained to eliminate targets Alanino backup, no oversight. I was a ghost, appearing from the darkness, finishing the job, and disappearing, leaving only fear and bodies behind. The kind of training I had undergone wasn't written about in books or taught in military academies. I was built for war against an enemy that always had more numbers, more firepower, more resources. I knew how to act fast, brutal, and without hesitation. When I was sent on a mission, I never asked questions. I didn't need orders over the radio or satellite support. I was one man, one army, and I was the best at what I did. But one day, I decided I had had enough. After one particularly dirty assignment, I looked in the mirror and realized I didn't want to see that reflection anymore. I wanted another life, one without screaming, blood, and pain. So I walked away. I built a family. I built a business. I made a promise to myself that I would never return to the darkness I had lived in for so many years. But now, they had left me no choice. I looked at my phone again, rereading the frozen account notice. George wasn't just playing games, she was erasing me, taking everything I built. I took a deep breath, forcing down the rage bubbling inside me. No, this wasn't just anger anymore. This was a calculated decision. I was no longer a businessman. I was no longer a family man. I had become what I once was. I knew exactly what I needed: weapons, ammunition, gear. And the best place to get them? The police station. Those pigs had grown fat on their unchecked power, so used to doing whatever they wanted without consequence. They had forgotten what real fear felt like. They were about to remember. I climbed into my SUV, my hands gripping the wheel like a vice. Blood pounded in my ears. My mind was clear, cold, razor sharp. Most of the cops were busy ransacking my office, stealing what they could, intimidating my employees. That meant the only ones left at the station were the ones who weren't expecting trouble. Their biggest mistake. I pressed down on the gas, feeling the engine roar beneath me like a beast about to be unleashed. Streetlights flashed across the hood, but I saw nothing but my target, the building ahead. The station lights glowed in the night, a dull, gray box, a symbol of corruption. On any other day, I would have parked outside, walked in like a civilized man. But not today. I slammed my foot down on the gas. The SUV roared forward, smashing through the glass doors of the station. The crash was deafening. Wood, metal, and glass exploded in every direction. Desks flipped, chairs flew, papers scattered like a blizzard. Screams. Chaos. Panic. I yanked the keys from the ignition, grabbed the knife and pistol I had brought with me, and kicked the door open. The first idiot standing nearby opened his mouth to yell, but I drove my knife straight into his throat, twisted it, and yanked it free. Blood gushed, and his body collapsed onto the shattered glass. Intruder! Someone shouted, but I was already moving. Two more guards rushed me on with a baton, the other with a pistol. I dodged the first swing, kicked a desk into the second guy, sending him sprawling. The one with the baton swung again, but I sidestepped and drove my elbow into his face. His nose crunched, blood spurting as he staggered back. Before he could recover, I grabbed his arm, twisted it, and forced his own gun under his chin. One pull of the trigger. His head exploded, painting the wall in crimson. The second cop scrambled to his feet, fumbling for his gun. I didn't give him the chance. I hurled my knife, watching as the blade sank deep into his eye socket. He twitched, choked, then collapsed in a heap, his body convulsing for a few final seconds before going still. The alarms blared. More footsteps. More shouting. I grabbed a rifle off the wall, ripped extra magazines from a dead cop's vest, and moved forward. Tonight, this station would burn. They thought they could break me. They thought I would be afraid. Now they would learn who I really was. I moved through the precinct like death itself, bringing retribution with every step. They tried to fight back, but none of them were ready for what had descended upon them. They were jackals, used to ruling through fear, preying on those too weak to resist. But they had never faced someone who lived for war. I moved fast, methodically, without hesitation. A burst from my rifle tore through a group huddled behind the front desk, their bodies jerking as blood sprayed the walls. One of them tried to crawl away, clutching his shredded gut, wheezing, choking on his own blood. I stepped closer, leveled my gun, and without blinking, put a bullet in the back of his skull. More came running from the break room. One of them managed to lift a shotgun, but my grenade landed at his feet before he could react. He and his friends ceased to exist. The air filled with the stench of blood, gunpowder, and burning flesh, mixing with the dying screams. I didn't care. I gunned them down as I moved, a machine of precision and destruction. They scrambled for cover, begged for mercy, but there would be none. These bastards had hidden behind their badges, thinking it made them untouchable. Now, their badges wouldn't save them. Neither would their pleas. Or their fear. The last one tried to lock himself inside the armory. I kicked the door open, shattering the lock, and pumped 3 rounds straight into his chest. Silence. I exhaled, leaning against the wall, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. That was it. Everyone inside this godforsaken place was dead. I moved quickly, filling a duffel bag with weapons, ammo, grenades, whatever I could use. In the evidence room, I found something even better, a pack of C4. I set the charges along the building's perimeter and walked out, climbing into a cruiser parked outside. I sat there for a moment, looking into the rearview mirror, taking one last glance at this den of filth. Then, I pressed the detonator. The explosion ripped through the night. Fire engulfed the station, a pillar of flames roaring into the sky. The blast shattered windows, tore steel beams apart, sent debris raining down in all directions. Screams. The screech of collapsing metal. The final, dying breath of a corrupt empire. And then, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. George. A slow grin spread across my face as I answered. "Hello, George." My voice was calm, steady, as if we were discussing the weather. There was silence on the other end. Then, a sharp breath, and an explosion of fury. "You crazy son of a bitch." I could hear him struggling to keep control, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Do you even realize what you've done, you bastard?" He was losing it now, voice cracking. "You destroyed the precinct. You killed everyone. You just declared war." I smirked. "No, George," I said, lowering my voice so every word sank into him like a blade. "I ended it." Silence. I could hear him breathing, hear the wheels in his head turning, trying to process the fact that things had spiraled completely out of his control. "You're dead, Michael," he finally spat, voice dripping with venom. "I'm going to find you. I'm going to burn everything you have to the ground." "I'll know, George," I cut him off, voice sharp as ice. "Now, I'm coming for you." Another pause. A long one. I could almost hear him swallow. I chuckled, then ended the call. I knew where George was. That coward wasn't stupid enough to stay out in the open after what I had just done. He had a fortress. An abandoned grain elevator on the outskirts of town, transformed into a private stronghold for scum like him. High steel fences, cameras on every corner, mercenaries patrolling with automatic rifles, thugs who thought terrorizing civilians made them warriors. They had never faced someone like me. Armored SUVs lined the perimeter. Floodlights bathed the complex in a cold glow. Guard towers stood at the corners, and two main entrances, one through the loading dock, the other via an underground tunnel used for smuggling. I knew exactly how they would set up their defenses. I knew which roads they would block, where they would place their sniper, and which areas would be heavily guarded. I knew that George, panicking, was already making desperate calls for reinforcements. He thought that walls, guards, and bribes could protect him. He didn't understand. I am not someone you protect yourself from. I'm someone you run from. And no fortress would save him. I drove without headlights, melting into the darkness. The wind carried dust across the road, the night sky swallowing me whole. I knew the roadblock was ahead. George wasn't an idiot. He expected me, and that meant he had ordered his men to shut down access. It wouldn't help him. I slowed the car, scanning the area. 2 SUVs, parked sideways to block the road. 5, maybe 6 men. One with an assault rifle slung over his shoulder. 2 smoking cigarettes. Another scanning the road with binoculars. I reached for my pistol, twisting the suppressor onto the barrel. Then, I slipped out of the car, moving like a shadow along the edge of the road. Silent, controlled, deadly. The first one never saw me coming. He had just flicked the ash from his cigarette when my blade slid across his throat. His blood was warm against my gloves as I lowered him gently to the ground. The second turned at the sound of something strange too late. I put a bullet clean through his eye. No scream. No sound. Just death. The remaining 2 sensed something was off, shifting nervously, hands twitching toward their weapons. But I was already in their space. I buried my knife into one's stomach, twisting the blade, feeling the steel carve through his insides. He gasped, staggered back, choking on blood. The last one barely had time to react before I grabbed him by the hair and drove my forehead into his nose. Cartilage shattered. Blood sprayed across my face. He crumpled to his knees, gagging, and I slid his throat open with one clean motion. I stepped over the bodies and slid into one of their SUVs. Now, I had a new ride. The sniper would be on the roof of an old hangar, 500 meters from the fortress. He was the last real threat before I breached their gates. The problem was, he didn't know he was already dead. I stopped in the shadows and slipped out of the car, moving along the hangar wall. Climbing to the roof was easy. The old side ladder was rusted in places, but still sturdy enough to hold my weight. When I reached the top, I saw him. He was crouched, rifle aimed toward the road, waiting for me. His finger rested lightly on the trigger, his eye pressed to the scope. A half-empty energy drink sat beside him, had been preparing for a long night. I drew my knife, stepped up behind him, and drove the blade straight into the base of his skull. His body jerked, fingers twitching around the rifle, but I held him steady, ensuring he didn't slump forward. Carefully, I laid him down on the rooftop, took his rifle, and crawled to the edge to get a clear view of the compound. Now, George. The vantage point was perfect. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. A few stood near the entrance, gripping shotguns. The courtyard was lit by floodlights, but I could see the blind spots, the gaps in their coverage, the places where I could slip in unseen. I knew how to enter. I knew how to kill them all. I knew George was afraid, and he should be, because he was next. I exhaled slowly, steadying my heartbeat. Now that I was in position, it was time to begin. The sniper rifle in my hands was cold, solid, reliable. I checked the magazine, took aim, and locked onto my first target. A guard stood near the gate, shifting nervously, gripping his shotgun tight. He had no idea that death was watching from above. I squeezed the trigger. His head exploded like an overripe melon. I didn't wait. Next, two guards near the warehouse were mid-conversation, unaware that their time was up. The first round tore through one's throat. The other turned, eyes widening as his friend collapsed, gurgling, but my next bullet took him in the eye, ripping out the back of his skull. I kept working, methodically dropping them one by one, leaving a trail of lifeless bodies bleeding out among the storage crates. Some tried to run, but I knew where they'd go. My bullets found them before they could make it. When the rifle clicked empty, I discarded it and jumped down. Now close quarters. I moved forward, knife in one hand, pistol in the other. Two men appeared ahead. One spotted me, opened his mouth to shout, but I was already on him. The blade sank deep into his gut, all the way to the hilt. His body arched, his last breath escaping in a choked wheeze. The second guard raised his rifle, but I ripped my knife upward, splitting open the first man's stomach, and fired a round into the second one's skull. Fast, efficient, lethal. I moved through the compound, leaving a trail of blood in my wake. And then, suddenly light. Floodlights snapped on, blinding me. I heard the clicks of safeties disengaging. For guards. Guns aimed at my chest. And then, I saw him. George. Standing a few feet away, smirking, holding a pistol, with the barrel pressed to Julia's head. Well, his voice dripped with venomous amusement. Look who made it. Michael, old friend. I have to say, I'm impressed. You got farther than I expected. But now, let's talk. I stood still, fingers tense around my weapons. Let her go, George. He laughed. Oh, of course. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I narrowed my eyes. What? I'm letting her go. He pulled the gun away from her head and lightly pushed her toward me. Take your wife and get out of here. Just walk away, and I'll forget all about this. You won, Michael. I didn't trust him. But when Julia stepped toward me, I instinctively reached for her, wrapping my arms around her protectively, and felt the cold steel slide into my side. I froze. Shock locked my body in place as I stumbled back, staring at her, disbelief burning through the pain. Julia. She stood in front of me, leaving the knife buried in my flesh. Her eyes held no regret, no fear, only hate. Behind me, George laughed. How's that for a surprise, Michael? He clapped his hands together. You didn't really think it would be that easy, did you? I staggered, my strength draining fast, blood soaking through my clothes. The guards rushed in, tackling me to the ground, ripping my weapons away. My arms were wrenched behind my back, steel cuffs biting into my wrists. I looked up at Julia, still unable to fully comprehend. Why? She stared down at me, her lips curling into a wicked smile. Because you're pathetic, Michael. Her voice was cold, devoid of emotion. You always thought you were better than everyone. Always so damn righteous, so honorable, so untouchable. I was sick of it. She leaned in closer, her fingers running across my cheek like a lover's touch, but in her eyes, only disgust. Did you really think I was ever yours? No, darling. I've been with George for a long time. And do you know why? Because you disgust me. You humiliated my man when you beat him that night. You thought I would love you for it? No, Michael. It made me sick. You're just a self-righteous fool who doesn't understand that this world doesn't belong to men like you. I blinked, blood pooling in my mouth. You set him on me and Catherine? Her smile widened. Of course. That little brat was in my way. You were in my way. I was tired of listening to your bullshit about morals and doing the right thing. I wanted you gone. I closed my eyes. The pain in my side was nothing compared to the one crushing my chest. George stepped forward and kicked me hard in the ribs, sending me onto my knees. Well, Mikey, looks like you lost. I lifted my head, first at him, then at Julia. She was smiling. She was enjoying this. She was reveling in the fact that I was about to die. And next, it would be Catherine. I was still on my knees, feeling the warm trickle of blood running down my sides, soaking into my clothes. My head throbbed, my vision blurred at the edges, but I kept my gaze steady, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing pain on my face. Julia stood beside George, her lips curled into a smug smile, as if she had just made the greatest decision of her life. And you know what's funniest, Michael? George crouched in front of me, grinning. I already know where your precious little girl is. Did you really think you could hide her? That your crippled friend could protect her? How stupid. I tensed, clenching my teeth. You don't know what you're doing, George. He laughed, slapping his knee. Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. While we're having this nice little chat, my men are already there. And your pathetic friend? He won't be able to do a damn thing. You know what I think? You made a mistake sending her to him. You handed her over to me with your own 2 hands. I exhaled slowly, narrowing my eyes. George thought he had won. He didn't know Danny. Even in a wheelchair, Danny was the best of us. The best killer I had ever known. We had been through hell together, and if I trusted anyone to protect Catherine, it was him. And right at that moment, George's phone vibrated in his pocket. He frowned, shot me a wary glance, then pulled it out and put it to his ear. Well, is it done? Only silence. Then, ragged, labored breathing. I watched as tension crept onto his face. Talk, goddammit. Boss. The voice was weak, strained. They. Then, a sharp, wet, gurgling sound. George went rigid. For a second, all I could hear was a rasping cough, a faint, choking gasp like someone drowning in their own blood. And then, a voice. Calm, cold, merciless. Danny's voice. They're all dead. I saw the color drain from George's face. I smiled through the pain. I told you have no idea who you're dealing with. I watched him, watching me. Watched as fear slowly crept into his features, eating away at that smug arrogance he had been so proud of just minutes ago. His lips parted, his eyes narrowed, his fingers tightened around his phone, like he couldn't quite believe what he had just heard. They were all dead. Danny's voice had been flat, devoid of emotion, and I knew exactly what was running through George's head. He had thought it would be easy, that taking my daughter would be a simple job, that my crippled friend was nothing but a weak, broken man. He didn't understand. And now it was too late. Something ignited inside me. Rage. Pure, undiluted fury. The kind that burned away pain. That erased fear. Nothing held me back anymore. I no longer felt the wound in my side, the ache in my body. I ripped the knife from my flesh, surged to my feet, and with a ragged snarl, slammed the handle straight into the nearest guard's face, feeling the sharp crunch of breaking bone. He staggered, but I was already grabbing him by the throat, yanking him forward, and slicing the blade clean across his neck. A spray of hot blood coated my arm as he collapsed in a gurgling heap. Another guard scrambled to lift his rifle, but I was faster. I lunged, kicked the weapon from his grip, and drove the blade straight into his eye. He screamed just for a second before I twisted the knife, feeling the steel carve through his brain. He dropped like a stone. George paled, eyes darting wildly. Shoot him. Kill him. His voice cracked, shaking with panic. But I was already moving. I grabbed a fallen rifle, rolled to the side, and squeezed the trigger. The closest guard jerked as bullets tore through his chest, sending him slamming into the metal door behind him. Another turned to run. I shot him in the knee, dropping him to the ground, then walked over and put a bullet through his skull. Then I looked up. George wasn't smiling anymore. He stood frozen, staring at me. I saw it then the moment he realized what he had done, that he had pushed too far. That he had stepped over a line where forgiveness no longer existed. That there was only one way this ended. With me, and with his blood. I took a step toward him. What's wrong, George? My voice was low, cold as steel. Where's all that bravado? Where are your threats? Where's your army? He swallowed hard. Then, his fingers slackened, and his pistol clattered to the floor. Shit. His lips trembled, his body quivering. He stumbled backward, bumping into Julia. She grabbed his arm, her own eyes darting wildly now, fear creeping in. George, what now? Her voice had lost its confidence. But George wasn't listening. He was already running. He turned, bolting for the door, shoving past Julia, knocking over crates, knocking over her. She stumbled, caught herself, then ran after him. But I didn't let them go. I followed. George ran like his life depended on it. Because it did. His shoes pounded against the concrete, his breath ragged, his arms pumping as he dodged obstacles, careening through the storage area. Julia scrambled after him, clutching his jacket like a frightened child. But I had a knife. I took a step forward, aimed carefully, and threw the knife with all my strength. The blade sank into his thigh with a wet, sickening squelch, like it was greeting his muscles. George let out a high-pitched squeal, stumbling forward before crashing face-first onto the floor in the worst landing of his life. Motherf! He screamed, writhing on the ground, desperately trying to reach the knife. Every pathetic attempt only made his agony worse. I walked toward him slowly, savoring every step. Well, that wasn't much of a sprint, was it? I chuckled, crouching down and resting my elbow on my knee. Getting old, George? Or did fear just tangle up your legs? As son of a bee, he rasped, panting heavily, sweat beading on his forehead. I can offer you money, Michael. A lot of money. I'll give it all back. The business, the accounts, everything. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it, then burst out laughing. Oh, that's sweet. And here I was thinking you'd even throw in an apology. Maybe even squeeze out a tear. Then again, you probably just pissed yourself instead. I reached out and ripped the knife from his leg. George let out a shriek so loud, I was surprised his balls didn't crawl back up inside him. All right, George. Enough whining. I tightened my grip on the knife, leaned in close to his trembling face, and whispered, You talk too much. Let's fix that. Let's make sure you never have to hear your own sniveling again. At first, he didn't understand. Then the blade pressed against his ear. His eyes widened in pure, animalistic terror. And no, Michael, please, don't. Blood sprayed across my hand as his ear hit the floor with a soft plop. George screamed. If he had anything left between his legs, it had just shriveled into oblivion. Come on, George. You were a cop. Let's be honest, you never listened to anyone. Why would you need ears? His shrieking turned into choking sobs, but before he could catch his breath, I grabbed his nose. You know, they say if you cut off a man's nose, he loses more than just his sense of smell. He loses all his principles. Not that you ever had any, but let's test the theory. Schlurp. His nose landed right next to his ear. Blood gushed freely now, painting his face like some grotesque parody of a mobster from a cheap B-movie. He gurgled, convulsing on the floor. I pressed a finger to his trembling lips. Relax, George. I leaned in again, my voice a low whisper. You know what? I think I want you to leave this world the same way you lived in it, blind, dumb, and useless. I pressed both thumbs into his eye sockets. No, plie. Crunch. His eyeballs popped like overripe grapes, thick fluid oozing down his ruined face, turning his empty sockets into gaping, crimson pits. He twitched now. That's all he could do. He was worthless. I let go, wiped my hands on his shirt, and stood up. I walked to the shattered window. Goodbye, George. Fly high, asshole. I grabbed his collar, dragged his limp body to the edge, and heaved him out. He didn't even scream. Just a dull, wet splat somewhere below. Now Julia. She stood a few feet away, pale as a corpse. Her breathing was ragged, hands trembling violently. I could see a fear crashing over her, swallowing her whole. All that bravado, gone. But when she glanced down, when she saw what was left of George, something snapped. She let out a hysterical shriek and bolted for the exit. But fate is a cruel bitch. She didn't see the steel cable hanging loose from one of my earlier explosions. It hooked around her throat. Her body kept moving. Her head didn't. A sickening crack echoed through the space. Her body spasmed violently, legs kicking at the air. I took a few slow steps forward, watching the show. Her body still twitched, convulsing on instinct, but higher up, on the ledge, her severed head stared at me, frozen in an eternal expression of terror. I sighed, tilted my head, and muttered, Well, darling, seems we had different ideas about how to end this relationship. I stepped past her without another glance. There was only one thing left to do. I needed to get Catherine. I left that cursed place behind, leaving nothing but death, blood, and shattered lives in my wake. The city would never be the same. It had been cleansed. I took one of the SUVs parked outside and headed for Danny's. Pain pulsed through my side, my clothes soaked with blood. But I pressed on. I had been through worse, and this night wouldn't be my last. When I pulled up to Danny's house, Catherine was the first to run out. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but they were tears of relief. Dad. I barely managed to climb out of the car, but despite the pain, I pulled her into a tight embrace. It's over, baby girl. They'll never hurt us again. Danny sat in his wheelchair by the door, cigarette between his lips. He gave me a once-over, then smirked. You look like a butcher after a long shift. Thanks, Danny. Love your compliments. He waved me inside. Danny worked fast, stitching up my wound with the same steady hands that once made him a legend. Feel like hell, I muttered, knocking back a shot of whiskey to dull the pain. You'll feel worse if you keep squirming while I work. I chuckled. Catherine sat beside me, gripping my hand tightly. She was scared, but I could see it in her eyes' pride. She knew we were finally safe. When Danny finished, we raised our glasses. To victory, to family, and to the fact that no one will ever dare come after us again, I said. And to you finally quitting your habit of turning every goddamn place into a bloodbath, Danny added with a smirk. We drank. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt at peace. The next morning, the call came. The voice on the other end? Familiar. Michael, what the hell did you do? I smirked. I cleaned up the city. A long sigh. Those guys had it coming, but damn it, Michael, you put on one hell of a show. You didn't call just to tell me that. No. We unfroze your accounts. Even threw in a little bonus. Generous. Yeah. And we want you back. We need someone like you. I glanced at Catherine, who was laughing as she played with Danny's dog. Her laughter meant more than any mission, any vengeance, any debt. No. I'm done. You sure? Absolutely. Well, if you ever change your mind, I won't. I hung up. A week later, we packed up. We left the city behind. We found a new home somewhere warm, by the ocean. I opened a small restaurant, always filled with people. Catherine helped in the kitchen. Danny ran the bar. And me? I finally learned to cook something other than cold justice. We were happy, and no one ever dared threaten us again.